The media is lying to you about Venezuela. By now, you've probably seen the videos of people in Venezuela protesting, tearing down statues, burning banners of the current president, and blocking Venezuela's main airport. They're protesting because Venezuela just had an election, and the country's electoral authority announced that Nicolas Maduro, the candidate of the United Socialist Party, beat the right-wing opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez. For months, the opposition said they'd only respect the election results if they won. And sure enough, they immediately said the election was fraudulent after they lost. So what's their evidence? The first thing they say is that they've collected 73% of the voting precinct's paper results, and that the paper results don't match the electronic results. For those who don't know, Venezuela's voting system was designed with multiple controls to prevent fraud. There's a two-step voting process. First, where the voter has to produce his or her national ID card and scan their fingerprint to cast an electronic vote. And then the second part, the paper ballot, where the voter receives a paper receipt of their vote, which they drop into a ballot box, creating two tallies which can be checked against one another, one electronic and one paper. The opposing candidates each have witnesses in the precincts for the counting of the paper ballots to check against the electronic tally that gets released by the electoral authority. There were also over 900 election observers from 95 different countries present, and if you look at the reports from Sunday, people were overwhelmingly reporting a calm, orderly process at the voting stations. The opposition is claiming that they already have 3/4 of the paper ballots collected, but they haven't actually produced any of them. So until that happens, it's just talk. Another talking point the media has been running with is this exit poll that allegedly shows Edmundo Gonzalez winning by over 30%. The poll's been cited by the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Reuters, and seemingly shows that the results being reported don't match what voters were saying as they were leaving the polls. The only problem with this? The polling firm they're citing is basically an arm of the US government. As research done by Ben Norton over at the Geopolitical Economy Report shows, the polling firm Edison Research counts among its top clients Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and the Middle East Broadcasting Networks, all of which are US state-owned media that were created to disseminate pro-US messaging in their respective regions. They all work under the US Agency for Global Media, which is a US government agency, and its website says that the media outlets serve, quote, the long-range interests of the United States. Exit polling is also illegal in Venezuela, so they did this outside the law with no way of cross-checking it. US policy towards Venezuela has been incredibly hostile for the last 20 years. So it's hard to believe that a polling firm whose whole business model is based on conducting polls for US state media would suddenly turn out a poll completely contradicting the US narrative. But by far the most telling aspect of all of this is that the Venezuelan opposition said they weren't going to recognize the election results way before the election even started. In a video interview with the Financial Times a month before the election, opposition leader Maria Corina Machado said that they expected to win by a landslide, but that if they didn't, it could only be because Maduro committed fraud. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. Venezuela's electoral authority is supposed to have 72 hours to release the full results, but the opposition decided within 1 hour to declare it illegitimate, and within 12 hours they were staging an insurrection. The US did the same thing too. Almost immediately after votes started being tallied, Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, immediately tried to cast doubt on the election results. This begs the question, how could US officials have known their position on the election before it was even finished? And the answer is, they already had their minds made up. They were going to declare the election fraudulent no matter what. In fact, if the US respected the outcome of this election, it would be the exception to the rule. In 2019, a Venezuelan politician named Juan Guaido claimed he should be the real president of Venezuela after Nicolas Maduro won the election in 2018. Guaido was basically unknown in Venezuelan politics prior to his declaration and wasn't even a candidate in the 2018 election. And yet, despite this, the Trump administration pushed this ridiculous idea that he was actually the president of Venezuela. The US not only met with Guaido like he was the president, they also handed him state assets like Citgo and the Venezuelan embassy, while they funded extreme right-wing opposition groups in Venezuela and openly called for the overthrow of the elected government. In 2002, the Bush administration backed the coup against Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, who had begun redistributing oil revenue from Venezuela's state-owned oil company from the rich to the poor. US leaders met with the coup plotters, who were handpicked stooges of the Venezuelan elite, and openly endorsed the coup during the brief couple days when the coup mongers had taken power. There's a great documentary about the 2002 coup called The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, which you should all watch. This all begs another question. Why does the US want to overthrow the Venezuelan government? And the simple answer is, Venezuela has the largest petroleum reserves in the world. For the longest time, Venezuela's oil was there for the rich to plunder. The Venezuelan elite and multinational corporations treated Venezuela's oil sector like a personal piggy bank, while the Venezuelan people lived in absolute poverty. This went on until Hugo Chavez, a socialist, won the 1990 election and decided that Venezuela's wealth should be enjoyed by the Venezuelan people, not the elite or foreign corporations. Both the 2002 coup attempt and the 2019 coup attempt were directly tied to oil. In fact, in one interview during the 2019 coup attempt, Donald Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, openly stated that he wanted to see U.S. oil companies take over Venezuela's energy sector.
So if you think of a company like Citgo, which is owned by PDVSA, which is the state-run oil company there in Venezuela, we have a lot of those Citgo assets right here in the U.S. Is that something, for example, sir, that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, we're in conversation with major American companies now that are either in Venezuela or, in the case of Citgo, here in the United States. It'll make a big difference to the United States economically if we could have American oil companies really invest in and produce the oil capabilities in Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of the United States.
But Hugo Chavez wasn't just a resource nationalist. He was also an anti-imperialist. Part of what he did to change Venezuela was that he decided that Venezuela would no longer be a cog in the U.S.'s imperialist fever dreams in Latin America, that it would advocate for a new international order based on peace and cooperation instead of invasions and economic exploitation. Venezuela became one of the first countries to oppose the U.S. wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and also became an unwavering supporter of the Palestinian cause. Nicolas Maduro, Chavez's successor, has continued this legacy, forging closer ties with Global South countries seeking a new international system, one that's not based on U.S. domination. Venezuela's Bolivarian revolution has inspired other progressive movements throughout Latin America that have undermined U.S. power in the region. Antony Blinken, Marco Rubio, and all the other war criminals that have been managing and overseeing the genocide in Palestine didn't suddenly wake up one day and realize that they care so deeply about the little boys and girls in Venezuela. In fact, the US government is currently enforcing a sanctions regime that's estimated to have killed at least 100,000 people in Venezuela through manufactured poverty and scarcity. U.S. sanctions against Venezuela's oil sector, which is its primary source of income, caused the oil sector to collapse and the subsequent decrease of government income by 99%. So yes, the poverty and scarcity you hear about is very real, but it's caused by U.S. sanctions, which have forced Venezuelans to live off 1% of their pre-sanctions income. This is also what's behind the wave of Venezuelan migration that you hear about on the news. It all comes back to this policy of manufactured poverty. If the United States actually cared about the well-being of Venezuelans, they wouldn't be strangling the Venezuelan economy to the point where there are shortages of fuel and medicine. In fact, the United States tends to be the most violent when it feigns humanitarian concern. They manufacture social crises and then use it as an excuse for regime change. The US has a long history of supporting these color revolutions. When they know they can't directly invade a country, they create a social crisis to undermine it. And now, they're doing the same thing to Venezuela. Don't fall for it this time.